All right, what's up, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I'm Coach Greg, and today we're doing another Q&A. As always, if you have a question, make sure you click on the link in the description below if you actually want your question answered. If you want to risk it getting lost in the sauce, feel free to throw in the comments, and maybe I get to it, maybe I don't. I have ADHD, so you take your own chances when you mess outside my skills. All right. Now, that being said, here's our question for today. Can you get into the UFC or a top tier level of competition if you don't have the right sparring partners? Do I need to move gyms because I'm not getting that level of competition by sparring? I would say, while it's not necessary, your path is going to be a lot harder if you don't move. It's very tough to change gyms. It is very challenging because, when you've been at a gym for a while, it feels like family. I recently went through this myself where I moved gyms last year for my jiu-jitsu, and it was tough. I had some other reasons why I wanted to kind of change, but a big part of it is I felt like I kind of plateaued there. They weren't able to help me develop in certain areas of my game that I wanted to develop. And so I tried out a class under where I'm at now, and the room, man, it was way more technical in the type of lessons I was getting. It was things that were working on things that I wanted to work on. For example, the previous school I was at, leg locks. There were a couple guys who were decent at leg locks, but nobody who was really great at them. And half the time I'd go for a leg lock, and before I even got it, they were tapping. And when and where I'm at now, man, you got to be so much more technical in your rules. These guys are very, very proficient in defense because people are really good at getting them, so that means they get good at getting out of them. So it's much harder for me to catch guys in things like heel hooks and stuff like that, or toe holds. And so my ability to get there has gotten better, but also my understanding of what it means to be technical from there has changed. And where I would just get it and hope people tapped, because most of the time people were just like, oh, you got me. They weren't actually actively defending. Now I'm trying to get there, really isolate the position, and try to lock it in a good position and do a nice technical submission rather than cranking on stuff, because my understanding is growing as I'm learning more about leg locks and understanding better about what I want to get. And so what essentially happened is, by moving to this school, the roles there were way more technical, not just in leg locks, but in everything. White belts felt like blue belts felt like purple belts, and purple belts felt like brown. It just, everybody felt like a notch above, because part of it is this is a very competition heavy school. And so these guys, man, they put pressure on their roles. It wasn't like where I was at before. It's like, I'll pull guard this time. Next time you pull guard, we'll take turns. There's none of that. What I found is here, in a way it's nice, because I'm pulling a lot more. I like to start in half guard anyway. I'm a half guard player. That's what I like to do. I'm content to pull half guard every time. But there's a lot of guys that, some bigger guys, are like, oh, I wouldn't mind starting on top once in a while, but they're like, no, I'm going to go for top every time. If you can't do something about it, that's your problem. And so it's made me get better. My half guard has had to evolve because these guys are faster paced. They're, generally speaking, more athletic, stronger, faster. So it's a harder role anyway, but also a more technical role. So I have to be on my game, right? So what it's done is it's changed my game and improved me so much since I switched over. Now, part of it is whenever you get a new, fresh look on things, that's always good for you. When you start to plateau, it is good to break out of that. That's why I did it. I'm not trying to get in a top tier anything for UFC, PANs, none of that stuff. I just want to improve my game. I was at a point where I felt stuck and I wasn't getting the right type of answers, and now I am. So getting a fresh look sometimes that's valuable just in itself, but having better sparring partners has really evolved my game. Rolling with guys that are just doing things better, right? I have to be a lot smarter in how I roll now. And so it's forced me to evolve. And I went through kind of this crisis of faith thing almost, not that bad, but it was I started to rethink, man, how good am I? I didn't feel like I was that good. And I was I'm a pretty decent purple belt. And then I get there and I'm like, man, there's some blue belts here I'm fucking struggling with. Some of these guys are really good. And at one point, I was like, man, maybe I should not play half guard so much. Maybe I started playing with different guards. And eventually I found my way back home, but it was this is not working. I got to figure out something else. And it made me play with things I wouldn't normally play with and try things I wouldn't normally try. And then I started going back home to what I do like to do, but it made me evolve in my half guard. Like I played a lot of lockdown. Now I'm playing a lot more being offensive early from knee shield, being offensive, trying to get sweeps early on, having better counters. Like this is what I'm working on right now is like early recognition before I have to counter their sweeps or their passes so that I recognize they're going for the pass. Late recognition, so it's already too late. So what do I do now? And really like fine tuning every possible thing that could go wrong and really cleaning things up. And as a result, this last year has been a tremendous amount of growth. So when you're talking about trying to get into the UFC or some top tier combat sport, yeah, you kind of do need the best sparring partners. And while it's possible to do it without them, it's much harder. It is much, much harder. I would say if you don't have a gym like that near you, then what I would recommend is, one, if you help other people a lot, it raises the room. This is why, man, I try to go out of my way to help out everybody I can and show them as much as I can on the floor about everything that I know, because if I show you a move that I do a lot, I want you to know it, and I'll show you the counter for it too, so that way when I do it, you have a better counter, so I get better, right? I want everybody to be as good as possible so that I improve. Also, we're there to help each other. But if you don't have guys at that level, one, start showing them things. That's a good way to do it. Do a lot of very specific drills and give them specific things to work on to help you evolve. So let's say you're working on striking and you want to get better at, like, let's say, having good boxing defense. Make guys do nothing but jab cross at you, right? And be like, I'm not only going to just defend against this, I'm only allowed to defend using slips, right? That's all I'm able to do is slip, right? Maybe add some head movements, right? Open it up to whatever you want. I want to get better at just leg kicks today. So have them put it on me with leg kicks and just practice defending it, right? And work on like doing passive responding instead of like actively thinking about leg kicks. Work on whichever you're working at. As I throw it, just passively defending, checking, stepping back, whatever. I don't care what it is, but very specific training, situationals will help you a lot. Really fine-tuning offense and thinking out your game. If you don't have that, that's a good time to do that, is really flesh out, figure out anything in your game that you can work on that you can do with this group. But then ultimately, if you do have the opportunity to move to a better gym, it might be time. If you're asking this question, I think you're already probably feeling it. So it might be time. And like I said, it's very tough to leave what feels like a second family. When I changed gyms, it was tough. I'm good friends with a lot of those guys. A lot of them were like buddies I've been on the mats with for almost a decade. So it was tough for me to move from one gym to another, where I was just very used to this group of guys. And they were all great. They're good at jiu-jitsu. They're friendly guys. They're really nice. And it's nothing against them. It's just I wanted to kind of get something more out of my training that, you get to a point where you just didn't feel like I was getting it. And the nice thing is I made a whole bunch of new friends and built my family even more. And so there is that as well. But yeah, I would say the answer to the question is ultimately you do have to move and get better sparring partners at that point. And like I said, it could be, I don't want to shit talk anybody, but it could be the coaching is the issue. Like, it depends on the gym. So like a school like mine, I just moved to this location. Most of my students are fairly new. They have less than a year of training. So their level is not going to be super high yet because they haven't built that up yet. And that's okay. But there are some gyms that are very well established that the best you're going to hope for in that room is mediocrity because the coaches are not offering enough. And they might be good coaches, but they might be just okay, right? They will teach you good fundamentals. They'll teach you good average level stuff. But if you want elite level training, you might need elite level coaching too. And so your coach or your instructor or whatever you have, they might also not be at the level to provide you with what you need. And if you're looking to get in UFC, we're not talking about just the fighting skills, the actual like striking and jiu-jitsu. Like they might be okay with that, but then you need nutritionists, fitness trainers, all this stuff. There's a whole world in there, like the proper way to cut weight, having guys who can guide you through that process. I don't know that stuff, so I would never encourage somebody who is trying to be a pro fighter to train with me, to be honest. I would send them down the road to somebody who did do that because I can't really teach that. I don't do that. I don't manage fighters. That's a different skill set. But it could be like, even in general, like the general things they're working on, if they're still working on how to throw a jab cross every week, Like, you need guys who are going to give you more elite level stuff. If all you're doing is hitting mitts, you're probably not getting enough out of it. So I would say it sounds like it's time for you to change, Gems.